Another historic hurricane strikes southwest Florida. Hurricane Milton's storm surge, wind, rain, and tornadoes left a deadly path of destruction. We will investigate what made Milton so powerful. Plus, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg joins us to talk about how the federal government is responding. That's next on Southwest Florida in Focus. Coming up on Southwest Florida in Focus, Hurricane Milton's wind, rain, storm surge, and tornadoes slammed Florida communities. Many of the same places damaged during Hurricane Helene are once again cleaning up and figuring out how to recover. We speak with U.S. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg about the federal government's response to the storm. Plus, Floridians will soon decide whether to legalize recreational marijuana. WGCU digs deeper on the issue. We investigate what approving the measure will mean for businesses, healthcare, and law enforcement. And democracy in action. WGCU is there as Southwest Florida students sign up to vote to make sure their voices are heard. Hello, I'm Sandra Viktorova. Thank you so much for joining us. Well, people are cleaning up and drying out after Hurricane Milton sent wind, rain, and storm surge into Southwest Florida. The devastation is especially heartbreaking because many communities were just starting to clean up from Hurricane Helene. WGCU's Mike Walsher traveled to Punta Gorda, where people are once again faced with flood damage.
For 45 of Roger Good's 72 years, comfort meant a quaint home near Charlotte Harbor. Now, the 1-2 flood punch of Helene and Milton may knock him out of here.
The house is done. All our possessions are done. So we have to make a decision. Do we try to recoup it one more time, or is it the end of our Punta Gorda?
Milton's surge lifted large boats out of the harbor and dumped them 50 feet away in a park. The water flooded Bridget O'Grady's 130-year-old house. Helene left a foot of water in the place just a couple of weeks ago. O'Grady says she and her husband had just gutted the drywall and removed the flooring. Milton left more than a foot of water.
Now we're at the potential of having to bulldoze and start over. So that's super sad just for you want to preserve the city.
O'Grady refuses to let disaster get her down.
We're very much, you handle it, just take on the next challenge. I try not to let it take over too much.
Milton toppled trees and left power lines hanging across streets. The surge flooded the Celtic Ray pub in downtown Punta Gorda, despite a mountain of sandbags at the front door. Workers mopped mud out of the place. They say Helene left about 4 feet of water, Milton more like 4.5. Bartender Caroline Spoons.
I definitely cried when I got home to my own house, but it was dry, thank God. That's kind of part of the reason. But here, I was definitely in shock in a sense. It's hard to put emotions together when it comes to that, but I'd say sadness is definitely one of them for sure. And just heartache. I mean, that's just the main thing. I mean, no one wants to see this kind of stuff happen. Nobody.
The co-owner promises the pub will reopen.
This is what we signed up for, but this is ridiculous. You got to think this can't happen too many more times in the same place. I mean, but knock on wood, you know.
For WGCU News, I'm Mike Walsher.
State and federal authorities have worked together to coordinate resources before and after Hurricane Milton. I spoke with U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg about federal disaster resources. Secretary Buttigieg, welcome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
So let's start with this. Can you give us a sense of the federal resources on the ground right now to help Southwest Florida with its recovery?
Well, there's a massive federal response. Just to give you a sense of the scope, we have more than 400 personnel just from the FAA alone helping with restoring aviation operations, getting them to normal. We've also got our federal highway folks on the ground, and that's just the transportation piece. Overall, between Hurricane Milton response and Hurricane Helene, there are more than 8,000 personnel, including active duty troops, working to help make sure everything from communications to power to water to transportation are available to people who are recovering. Of course, with Milton, there is still a search and recovery operation underway, as well as looking at infrastructure. And we're doing everything we can to help the state and local authorities as they do that work.
So how taxing is this effort right now? As you know, this area was impacted so hard by Hurricane Helene. Folks are still in need of help from that storm, and here they are, trying to recover again. How taxing is it on your teams that you have on the ground and really resources in general?
Well, it's definitely been a tough 1-2 punch for everyone in the area who has been impacted, and likewise, for the responder community and everybody working to bring relief, it has them spread thin too. I was with the personnel at the FEMA headquarters yesterday, some of the same people I had seen a week earlier when we were there to discuss Helene response, and this time they're dealing with 2 major disasters, not just one. But they are pros; they are working round the clock, and we have the resources we need to make sure that we can deliver for people who are trying to both get through this moment and get on more of a path back to normal. And that's going to be our focus, especially as the search and recovery efforts give way to long-term restoration, making sure whether we're talking about a road, a bridge, or a whole community, that we're helping everyone get back to that sense of normalcy.
Mr. Secretary, we've been hearing a lot about rumors, disinformation about the aid that is available to folks who are hurting right now. One example of that is former President Donald Trump has said that the Biden administration has allocated almost all of the FEMA money to illegal migrants. What is your response to that, and what do you want Southwest Floridians who need help to know about the aid that they can receive and get?
Well, that statement by the former President Trump is false, and it's easy to show that it's false. And people facing a disaster deserve better. They deserve good information. As a matter of fact, they need good information. Look, when you're facing a situation like this, you need the basics, right? That includes food and water, it includes shelter, it includes power, it includes a cell phone connection, and it includes good information. So if you're wondering what FEMA is doing or can do for you, look for statements from FEMA. If you want to know what's going on in your community, look to trusted sources of information like your mayor or fire department. Don't listen to some guy on the internet. Don't listen to folks who are pushing political agendas. Look for the facts. And what I will say is that most of the figures that I've seen, leaders, including elected leaders from both parties, have been helping to make sure that good information gets out there. But anybody who has a voice or a platform right now has a responsibility to either tell the truth or be silent.
I'd like to shift now to this idea of building back. And I think the question is coming up is, should we be investing federal dollars, just government dollars in general, to build back in areas that are very vulnerable to what we're seeing with a climate? I'm thinking specifically about roads that are getting damaged that are built right up along the shorelines. I'm also thinking about a lady that I interviewed in our area who a community truly that lives in a neighborhood that's in a flood zone right next to a river, and their homes have been flooded 5 times since 2021. She's hoping that FEMA or the federal government will come in and help her rebuild. But what are your thoughts on this?
This is something we've been working on more and more at the Department of Transportation, and the infrastructure bill, the Biden-Harris infrastructure package, includes billions of dollars for building things in a way that is more resilient than the past. Because the simple reality is, whether you live in a coastal community like so many in Florida do, or in the Midwest, my hometown in Indiana, where a 1,000-year flood and a 500-year flood happened within 2 years of each other. The simple reality is that these extreme weather events are becoming more and more frequent, and we can't just assume that the plans and roads and infrastructure that served us well 50 years ago are going to work right now. Just to give you one example, right now we're funding a project to reconstruct a portion of State Route 907 in Miami Beach to make it more resilient for future floods. And we've got projects all across the country. There's one in Sarasota County, and we know there's going to be more where that came from, whether it's funding for planning or whether it's actual construction to be more resilient. And as President Biden urged us to do last time we were briefing him on these disasters, to build back wiser than the infrastructure that we inherited.
Secretary Buttigieg, we appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
In addition to the storm surge, Hurricane Milton hit the state with a record-breaking number of tornadoes. Those storms resulted in several deaths along Florida's east coast, far from where Milton made landfall in Sarasota County. Joining me now is Chief Meteorologist Tim Miller of the Florida Public Radio Emergency Network to talk to us about Milton's destruction. Welcome, Tim. So, Tim, this storm was historic for several reasons. One of them was the number of tornadoes and tornado warnings. Why?
Great question. I think it's historic for a number of reasons. One, it's one of the lowest barometric pressure readings that we've seen in the Gulf of Mexico with a storm. There have been lower, but this one was pretty impressive for sure. Remember, the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm, and the fact those winds at 180 miles per hour. But I think one of the things that we got to talk about is the tornadoes here. This storm produced supercell thunderstorms in Florida. Very unusual for us to get supercell thunderstorms. These are the type of storms you normally see in the Midwest that produce these big, what we call EF4, EF5 tornadoes, and that's exactly what we saw. And even wedge tornadoes, which it looked like an absolute wedge coming out of the sky. The amount of tornado warnings was at an all-time record. 127 to 130 warnings were issued for the state of Florida, the tornado warnings. That's unbelievable amount of tornado warnings. And these were, again, massive tornadoes produced by this storm. Usually we have these quick spin-up tornadoes, which is typical for these type of storms. Anytime a tropical storm has that potential for producing those tornadoes. But these large tornadoes, yeah, definitely record-breaking for sure.
Tim, a lot of folks are concerned that we are going to see many more storms in the future sort of developing over the Gulf of Mexico and developing quickly and moving into our area. Is this something that we need to sort of be prepared for on a regular basis for this quick development?
Well, I think during hurricane season, we certainly do. We're entering the lower part of hurricane season now. Hurricane season is on the wane, so that certainly is good news. But it is something we need to constantly be vigilant on at all times during hurricane season. That is a possibility.
All right, Tim, we so appreciate your help. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Florida is one of the biggest producers and consumers of medical marijuana in the country. This election, voters will decide whether marijuana should be available to anyone 21 or older without a prescription. We investigate what Amendment 3 could mean to our state economy, law enforcement, and our community.
Years ago, yeah, I was not a fan of marijuana. I didn't. You were getting it from your corner drug dealer on the street.
53-year-old Jeff Rexford has completely changed his mind about marijuana because he says it has completely changed his life. Marijuana is his solution for back pain now.
I've had pain pills before in the past for injuries and things of that nature, and they just make you feel not you. Just drowsy, lolly, just like a zombie. I no longer do that. I'll take a gummy and have that, and that'll just immediately just take away my pain. I'd say within about 30 minutes, I start feeling relief. And if I want to have instant relief, I'll smoke a pre-rolled joint.
Rexford picks up his medical marijuana at this Sunnyside dispensary in Cape Coral every week. He says his daily dose has also improved his marriage. It's helped him with his long battle with anxiety and depression.
It helps me communicate with my wife in a more civil manner. Not screaming or yelling. If I was excited about something, it's just a more relaxed feeling.
Rexroyd is one of nearly 900,000 people holding a medical marijuana card in Florida. He thinks more Floridians could see similar benefits if it were easier to get marijuana. That's why he supports the legalization of recreational marijuana. He doesn't fully understand the opposition.
It's an uneducated age thing. The older adults, the older baby boomers, they looked at that as a party drug. You know, they didn't realize back in the 60s and 70s that it had benefit to it.
It's a proven job creator.
Cole Peacock supports Amendment 3 as well, and not just for the personal benefits. Peacock is co-owner of the Caloosahatchee Cannabis Company in downtown Fort Myers, which offers everything from coffee to beer infused with CBD. That's one of the active ingredients in the cannabis plant that doesn't make people high.
The idea is that it helps with sleep, it calms you down.
Peacock would like to add recreational marijuana to his products. He hopes to get a recreational marijuana dispensary license from the state if voters approve Amendment 3. He's seen the benefits in his life as well.
That it covers back pain, muscle soreness, sleep, potential and anxiety when things are taking place.
Peacock helped push the passage of medical marijuana in Florida. He says the state economy will benefit expanding into recreational pot as long as it's regulated carefully.
As a whole, pays very well. It pays on average more than most industries do. It touches everything from construction to development to marketing to science to pure agricultural growing. You got to have buildings there. The grow facilities, they're large, massive facilities.
Massive, like this 750,000 square foot cultivation facility in North Florida, one of the largest in the country, built by Trulieve, Florida's largest marijuana producer. There are now 665 dispensaries in the state, about 30 in Southwest Florida. It's estimated the medical marijuana industry generates more than $2 billion in sales annually. But medical marijuana isn't taxed. Recreational marijuana could be. Some economists predict pot sales could triple if Amendment 3 passes, and that could generate at least $200 million or more in state and local revenues each year.
The industry is very profitable. If you run it the right way and run it as a business, if you're just doing it as a hobby and trying to make a quick dollar, like any other industry, you're probably going to fail.
But Deborah Grishala sees danger in passing Amendment 3.
My son really showed psychosis while smoking marijuana. He thought that FBI was listening in on phone calls. He thought his girlfriend was having an affair. He thought people were actually listening in on him when he was at home. You know, he actually was really very, very out there.
Grishala is a behavioral health technician at Valiant Recovery in Punta Gorda, which treats people struggling with substance use disorder. She says many people are unaware of the potential risk between frequent pot use and psychosis, a disconnection from reality. She's in recovery from substance abuse herself. She says pot caused her paranoia.
I've had psychosis with marijuana when I smoked it, back before it was even as potent as it is now, thinking that people were talking about me. A lot of just weird mental things going on.
While marijuana's long-term risks are still being researched, there is growing evidence of potentially severe side effects in some people. Several studies, including 2 from Britain and Denmark, suggest a link between the frequent use of pot and psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia. Scientists believe it's the high levels of THC, the mind-altering chemical in cannabis, that can trigger the disorders in people who have a genetic disposition to them. Gregory Colora is one of them. He is now a counselor at Valiant Recovery.
I was first introduced to it probably around 15 or 16, and it consumed my life after I smoked it.
Colora says pot was a gateway drug.
I began going down a darker path of what comes with drug addiction. I thought it was just going to be fun and something to do recreational, and it turned into a lifelong disease.
Colora and Grishala say legalizing pot won't just affect those who use it.
I look through our county's, the sheriff's website every morning and see all the DUIs and people being irresponsible, and I just feel this is going to be another way for that to happen. At the end of the day, you're putting lives at risk.
We wanted to get a different perspective on recreational marijuana, and so we turned to the state of Colorado. It's been legal there since 2012 when voters passed an amendment making Colorado the first in the country to allow recreational use. I spoke to the sheriff of Arapahoe County, Tyler Brown, to see how it's changed his community. Sheriff Brown, welcome. So
Thanks for having me.
You were born and raised in Colorado. From a law enforcement perspective, how would you describe the impact recreational marijuana has had on your state since it was approved more than 10 years ago?
Since the passage of the recreational marijuana law, we've had a drastic increase in illegal marijuana grows across our county. We've had approximately 30 takedowns of illegal marijuana grows that are occurring in neighborhoods. And I think it's something that people need to take into account when they're looking at voting for recreational marijuana. Just like anything that we have in our society, there are people that are going to try to get around the rules and regulations. And we've seen that in our community when it comes to these illegal grows. And these illegal grows are happening in every type of community that we have. Nice communities that have seen houses destroyed by marijuana grows. And we're not talking about 5 or 6 plants. We're talking about hundreds of marijuana plants inside of a home so people can grow this substance and get around some of the tax laws and still provide it on the black market. So as nice as it sounds sometimes to have marijuana be available recreationally, and those individuals that partake in the use of that doing it responsibly, there's still going to be that underbelly of the black market that has marijuana out on the streets and harming the community.
So is your opinion that recreational marijuana has made your community less safe than before?
I don't think less safe. I think that there is an impact that is damaging. You know, we've seen a lot of tax revenue. I worked in a small town here in Colorado for a while that had 2 marijuana shops in it, and those marijuana shops brought in a tremendous amount of tax revenue to that municipality. That allowed the law enforcement agency there, the police department, to benefit immensely from that tax revenue. But I have seen an impact of homes being purchased and marijuana being grown in them.
So Sheriff Brown, what would you say would be your message to voters in Florida when trying to decide how to vote on this recreational marijuana amendment?
Slow down and get it right. Make sure that all the rules and regulations are in place. Make sure that the funding, if you're going to vote yes on it, that there's funding there that supports the regulation, and that you have the ability to support your law enforcement agency when those black market grows are there. I think we've seen a trend across the country of people and states moving towards recreational marijuana. There's been discussion with the DEA of reclassifying marijuana, but it's important to make sure that those regulations are there and that there's ways that you're able to address individuals that are going to try to take advantage of these situations.
Sheriff Tyler Brown from Arapahoe County, Colorado. Thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you, Sandra. I appreciate it.
The Collier County Supervisor of Elections Office wrapped up its 11th annual High School Voter Registration Challenge. It's a friendly competition between Collier high schools to register and pre-register the most voters among the school's eligible students. Before the challenge ended, WGCU's Tara Callaghan visited Immokalee High, where students shared what being an official voter means to them.
Who wants to share why they think it's important to vote?
Immokalee High School students gathered in the school's auditorium during Spirit Week to find out what it means to become a registered voter.
The High School Voter Registration Challenge is really trying to educate young voters, future voters, introducing them to the electoral process, introducing them to the Collier County Supervisor of Elections, picking their brain of what they know about elections, and then kind of filling in those holes. At the end of the day, of course, it's helping them pre-register and register, something that I feel like they might be a little scared to do or they might not know how to do. That's what we're here for.
Now when you guys are done, please meet us up at the table. I think it's important to vote because it affects us directly, and also because it takes a community to start something. If you want to change something, then you have to do it.
Throughout the day, 92 Immokalee High School students registered or pre-registered to vote.
Yeah, I'm just excited because our country's just it has a lot of history, and so I guess I just kind of want to be a part of that.
Several students shared that they are first-generation Americans, emphasizing the deeper significance their vote holds beyond casting a ballot.
Help the voice of my family get heard, because I'm not necessarily voting only for myself, for my mom and dad too.
To be able to bring this to them, to bring this experience to them, to educate them on this, things that they might not be thinking about, is something super important, because then they really start thinking about it, bringing it at home, and then encouraging their friends and family to do the same.
Since its start in 2013, Collier County Supervisor of Elections High School Voter Registration Challenge has registered and pre-registered more than 9,500 students.
Perfect. Stickers. Thank you for registering.
For WGCU News, I'm Tara Callaghan.
And one issue before these young voters is Amendment 4. That's the measure on abortion access. Both sides of the abortion debate are working to get their messages out statewide. Coming up next week on Southwest Florida in Focus, we examine the amendment and its impact statewide. That's coming up next week on Southwest Florida in Focus. Have a great week, everyone.